Well, mine's probably not going to be that great, but yeah, I'm just gonna read it. Okay. So, in 2019, God gave me a promise. The promise is the initial point of contact where God reveals what He has for you, and purpose is the fulfillment of the promise that God gave to you. So, with that word, I was excited. I was hopeful, and I believed that what God had spoken to me would come to pass. What I didn't realize was that between the promise and the fulfillment would be years of waiting. So, years of uncertainty, years of tribulation, years of lessons, years of mistakes. What I thought would happen quickly ended up taking nearly 8 years. And I'm only now truly just scratching the surface of what God has always had for me. But if I'm being completely truthful, I did not wait perfectly. There were many moments of faith. There were much more moments of doubt. There were countless moments of confusion. There were moments when I questioned whether I had heard God correctly. And there were moments when I became angry with God because I could not understand why the promise seemed so far away. I made mistakes, some small, some significant, and some delaying the very thing I desired for so long. I acted out of impatience, I acted out of fear, I acted out of pain, and those bad decisions created consequences that I had to live through. Yet, despite all of that, God remained faithful. So, today I want to talk about patience through trials and what happens when God gives you a promise but requires you to endure a process before you can walk in the purpose. So, my first point is that the promise is often immediate, but the process is not. So, many people love receiving a word from God. We love the excitement, we love the vision, we love the promise. But what we often overlook is that God is not only concerned with giving us a destination, He's concerned with developing us on the journey. So, James 1 and 4 in the New King James Version tells us, "But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." Patience is not passive waiting. Patience is remaining faithful while God completes a work inside of you. So when God gave me the promise in 2019, I thought He was preparing the promise for me. What I eventually realized was that He was preparing me for the promise. The person who received the promise in 2019 is not the same person standing here today. The waiting changed me, the trials changed me, and the process changed me. So, my second point, sometimes we rush because we're in pain. So, one thing that I've learned is that impatience is not always rooted in rebellion. Sometimes impatience is rooted in pain. When you've experienced trauma, loss, grief, rejection, instability, loneliness, disappointment, betrayal, hardship, or uncertainty, the promise doesn't simply look attractive. The promise looks like relief. I wasn't always trying to outrun God because I was rebellious. Sometimes I was trying to outrun pain. In fact, in most cases, we're not necessarily trying to rebel against God. We're tired, we're traumatized, lonely, grieving, struggling financially, waiting for healing, waiting for a spouse, waiting for restoration, or waiting for a breakthrough. I wanted the suffering to stop. I wanted stability. I wanted answers. I wanted clarity. And I wanted healing. I wanted to get to the promise faster than God's timing intended because I believed the promise would solve everything I was struggling with. But God's timing is different from ours. Looking back, I can see that many delays were not punishment, they were preservation. Some closed doors were protection, some waiting seasons were preparation, some delays were acts of mercy. God knew what I needed before I knew what I needed. To my third point, God is faithful even when we are not. So, one of the greatest lessons I learned during this process is that God's faithfulness is not dependent on our perfection. The miracle is not that I waited perfectly. The miracle is that God remained faithful despite my imperfections. So I made mistakes while waiting. I made decisions out of impatience. I made decisions out of fear. I made decisions because I was tired. I made decisions because I was hurting. And some of those choices created ripple effects that impacted my life in ways that I never anticipated. But God's grace met me there. God's mercy met me there. God's love met me there. The Bible is filled with people who struggled while waiting. Abraham struggled while waiting. Him and Sarah conceived Ishmael out of impatience. Moses struggled while waiting. Moses hit the rock in anger instead of speaking to it, forfeiting the promised land in the process. David struggled while waiting. In Psalm 13, David repeatedly asks, "How long, O Lord?" Peter struggled while following Jesus when Jesus declared he would build his church upon him. Yet God remained faithful. Not because their mistakes didn't matter, but because his grace was greater than their failures. Point 4. God redeems what we think we have lost. So one of the enemy's greatest lies is convincing us that we have permanently ruined God's plan. Many people carry guilt because of lost years. They think, if I hadn't made that mistake, or if I had obeyed sooner, or if I had listened better, or if I had trusted God more. But Joel chapter 2, verse 25 in the King James Version says, I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. God is not only a God of forgiveness, he is a God of redemption. Forgiveness removes guilt. Redemption takes what was broken and weaves it into the story. When I look back over these years, I can see God redeeming wasted time. I can see him redeeming bad decisions. I can see him covering mistakes made in ignorance. I can see him working through circumstances that should have disqualified me. Romans 8:28 became real in my life. God truly works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Not some things, all things, even the things that I wish had never happened. And I believe this is my last point. Point 5. The process produces what the promise requires. So there were seasons when I thought that God had forgotten about me. There were seasons when I questioned whether he remembered what he said. There were seasons when I couldn't understand why I was still waiting. But now I understand something that I didn't understand then. The purpose required a version of me that did not yet exist. The trials developed endurance, the disappointments developed humility, the failures developed wisdom, the waiting developed dependence on God. The process was not delaying the purpose. The process was producing what the purpose required. Had God given me everything when I first wanted it, I would not have been prepared to carry it. So today I stand as a witness that God keeps his promises, not always according to our timeline, not always according to our expectations, but according to his perfect wisdom. So if you're in a waiting season, don't assume that God has forgotten you. If you're struggling, don't assume that God has abandoned you. If you've made mistakes, don't assume that you have ruined his plan. God is still working. God is still preparing. God is still redeeming. God is still restoring. The promise may seem delayed, but delayed is not denied. And one day you may look back as I am today and realize that God was faithful through every trial, every setback, every mistake, every consequence, every disappointment, and every year of waiting. The promise was worth the process. The purpose was worth the patience. One thing that may encourage us even more is remembering that waiting is never wasted when it is surrendered to God. Every season has value in his hands. Even when we can't see progress, God is still at work beneath the surface, strengthening our faith, refining our character, and teaching us to trust him more deeply. The waiting season is not just about receiving what God promised, it's about drawing closer to the one who made the promise. The wait was worth it because God was not simply bringing me to a destination. He was shaping me for an assignment that had been uniquely designed for my life. Every experience, every lesson, every victory, and even every failure became part of the preparation. God curated my life for the purpose He intended, and in His wisdom, He developed me in ways that made me uniquely equipped to fulfill it. What once felt like delay was actually divine preparation, ensuring that when the promise arrived, I would be able to steward it in a way no one else could. And God was faithful the entire time. So I'd like to pray. um, Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight with grateful hearts. We thank you for being a God who keeps his promises. Thank you that even when we cannot see what you're doing, you are always working behind the scenes on our behalf. Lord, many of us are in seasons of waiting. Some of us have been waiting for months, some for years, and some have grown weary in the process. We confess that waiting has not always been easy. There have been moments of doubt, moments of frustration, moments when we questioned your timing, your plan, and even your presence. Forgive us, Father, for the times we tried to take matters into our own hands. Forgive us for the decisions we made out of fear, impatience, pain, loneliness, or discouragement. Thank you that your mercy is greater than our mistakes. Thank you that even when we have been disobedient, you remained faithful. Even when we wandered, you never stopped pursuing us. Lord, for those carrying trauma, grief, rejection, disappointment, betrayal, or hardship, I pray that you would strengthen them. Help them to understand that their pain is not wasted. Help them to see that the process is not punishment, but preparation. Give them the endurance to keep walking when the road feels long and the promise feels distant. Father, teach us what you are trying to develop in us while we wait. Produce patience in us. Produce character in us. Produce humility, wisdom, obedience, and trust in us. Let us not become so focused on the destination that we miss what you are doing in the journey. Your word says that those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. So tonight, renew strength where there is exhaustion. Renew hope where there is discouragement. Renew faith where there is doubt. And renew vision where there is confusion. Lord, remind us that delayed does not mean denied. Remind us that your timing is perfect. Remind us that if you gave the promise, you are faithful to bring it to pass. And when we look back over our lives, may we recognize that you redeemed wasted years, restored what was broken, healed what was wounded, and turned every trial into a testimony for your glory. Help us to trust you when we cannot trace you. Help us to obey you when we do not understand. Help us to praise you before the promise arrives. And when the fulfillment finally comes, let us never forget the lessons learned in all the waiting. Let us give you all the glory, all the honor, and all the praise. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Habakkuk 2:3. And that was my sermon. Okay, cool.